Now, I've been in some on-again, off-again relationships before, but blimey, Charlie, you don't usually start talking about getting back together after 2 days, but that is what has happened today. The Liberals and the Nationals could be back on as a coalition. Sussan Ley had been working on the phones this morning, overnight, talking to Nats who opposed breaking up the coalition to see if there was a way she could broker a truce. They were Barnaby Joyce, Darren Chester, Sam Birrell and Michael McCormack. Now, Michael will join me a little later in the show. And in the meantime, David Littleproud had been working up a list of shadow spokesmen and women for various portfolios so that the Nationals could present like they were themselves, an opposition party. And Ley was meant to announce her shadow ministry today too. So Littleproud was having a meeting with his people in Canberra this morning, but then Ley got in touch with him and struck a deal to quote-unquote pause the separation.
I had a brief meeting with Sussan Ley and she made an offer to reconvene her party room to discuss the 4 policy areas that the National Party demand as part of a coalition agreement. And I thank her for that. And as a consequence, I have decided to send those spokespeople home as a sign of good faith. And Sussan, as a sign of good faith, will not be announcing shadow cabinet. This is a positive step forward, one in which we've always said we'd be productive and constructive.
Fantastic. They've found a potential way forward. But all I could think today was, why didn't you do this earlier? I mean, why did you wait until this point, until after the coalition had split and all this blood had been spilt and people getting angry at each other and all the rest of it? Why did you wait until now to come up with a compromise deal? I mean, what they've come up with here seems quite sensible. The Nationals said very clearly that they had 4 policies that were non-negotiable for the coalition to continue: supporting nuclear energy, divestiture of supermarkets, the Regional Future Fund and mobile coverage in the bush. Fair enough. But Sussan Ley said the Liberal Party hadn't committed to any policies, and it wasn't about to, because absolutely everything was on the table and they'd have to duke it out before they knew what they were going to do. Fair enough, that's the decision she'd made. But if it's good enough now for the Liberal Party to say, OK, we'll make an exception to the process and we can meet and discuss these 4 specific policies, then why couldn't they have come to that agreement just a few days ago? This was what Ley said on Tuesday.
Now, the Nationals sought specific commitments on certain policies, and they've talked about that this morning. And our perspective is not about the individual policies themselves, but the approach that we said we would take to our party room about policies. Nothing adopted and nothing abandoned. So at this point in time, I asked the Nationals to respect those party room processes.
And they did respect those processes. They walked away and said, well, we'll talk later on. And now you've gone back to them. I mean, she said at that presser that she proposed that they come up with a shadow ministry together and then both parties go away and come up with their policy positions and then they'll come back and they'll work it all out. And the Nationals said, no, we want assurance on these 4 policies before we move forward. Ley refused and the Nats walked away. I mean, for 3 days now, we have been talking about this and how it's bad for Conservative politics in the long run and how the coalition has to eventually get back together. And as much as I've said that it will be for the best if it pulls the Liberal Party in the right direction, there is no getting around the fact that what we have witnessed this week has been unfortunate and unsavoury and unedifying. But this could have been so simple to avoid. We've seen that today. All that needed to happen was for Littleproud to drop his ridiculous request for Nationals to not have to abide by cabinet solidarity, and for Ley to call a party room meeting to discuss these 4 policies. Just get it done. And they're all pretty straightforward policies anyway. I honestly can't see a position in which the Libs don't back all these policies in again, so why couldn't they have just sorted it out before the you-know-what hit the fan? Now again, I'll say I think this can ultimately be a good thing because it sent a strong message to the Liberal Party. But you cannot get away from what a sideshow this has been and what a free kick it was to the Labor Party, particularly now that they're going to try and patch things up so quickly. On this basis, you know, you'd have to say it didn't need to happen. I mean, what did Ley think she was going to achieve? Whatever it was, it seemingly hasn't worked. I mean, we read in The Australian yesterday that she was keen for the coalition not to get back together before the next election and keep all the shadow positions for Liberals. Now, maybe that was a view born out of anger, and I can kind of understand that, but clearly, overnight, she's seen some sense. Now, it's of course possible that the Liberal Party doesn't back those 4 policies. I mean, they'd have rocks in their heads if they did that, and it does seem quite unlikely. So why did we have to go through this whole palaver in the first place?